Ethnobotany is the study of plants from the perspective and using knowledge from traditional or indigenous cultures and what they know about those plants. So in my field of research on trying to understand the evolution of medicinal use in plants, we use ultimately traditional knowledge, ethnobotanical knowledge, to identify plant species that have been used by traditional cultures for millennia to help treat various ailments. So it's almost the foundation starting block for our further investigations. All plants are made up of chemicals, and they often produce special chemicals to help defend themselves against herbivores and against pathogens that might attack them. Now, what's interesting is that generally closely related plant species, say 2 species of eucalypt or 2 species of acacia, tend to produce very similar types of chemicals, probably because they have this close evolutionary relationship and that maybe not that long ago they were the same species. So what this means is you tend to find groupings on the evolutionary tree, closely related species tending to have very similar chemical properties. A huge amount of modern pharmaceuticals are originally derived from natural plant products, and that knowledge originally is taken from traditional indigenous cultural knowledge. So it's been known for thousands of years that the bark of the willow tree was something that was very good for treating pain. That contains a compound called salicin, which is the main component of aspirin. So even these drugs that we use every day are originally derived from a traditional use. So these compounds that plants produce are part of their defensive systems. So they're compounds really designed to attack and prevent infection from bacteria or fungi or herbivores. So it's perhaps not surprising that they have some kind of biological activity. It just so happens in some cases that the chemicals they're producing have other beneficial effects that are beneficial for human use. So, for example, if they're producing a chemical and it's antibacterial, well, that might then potentially be used as an antibacterial compound by humans. But really, the thing that causes some plants to be useful to humans and others not, well, that's something we don't know, but it's essentially probably entirely just luck that some plants have those beneficial properties and others don't. Well, you're thinking here about the plants being beneficial to humans, but of course from the plant's perspective, it doesn't matter to them whether they're beneficial or not to humans. It's just whether the compounds they're producing are beneficial to them. So while it's true you may have beneficial properties evolving in some lineages and not others, the reason why it's not evolving in others is because they're evolving a different set of compounds that work for them, but it just so happens they're not much use to us. The other reason why plants evolve particular chemical profiles is because they're adapting to their particular environment, their habitat. For example, a plant that's growing in a very arid, dry environment is going to develop a different set of chemicals and physical structures than a plant that's growing in a luscious, wet rainforest. Likewise, a plant that is being munched by an aphid may develop a different sort of mechanism and chemical defense than a plant that is being munched by a larger herbivore like a mammal. What's really interesting here is that if we look across indigenous cultures from different countries, from South Africa, from the Himalayas, from New Zealand, what we see is that they're using the same kinds of plants as part of their traditional remedies. They're not exactly the same species because we're dealing with different parts of the planet, but they're in the same areas of the evolutionary tree, particular types of plants that are being used. And the fact that that's consistent across very different cultures tells you something really interesting about the evolution of these bioactive properties in plants. Well, it would seem, if you take how far apart these traditional cultures are, that they probably came up with this independently. So, for example, the Maori in New Zealand would have moved to New Zealand with a completely new range of plants there. It's very unlikely that they would have received knowledge from individuals in South Africa as to what would be the right plants to eat in New Zealand. So that makes it even more fascinating that there's been this convergence in the use of particular types of plants across very different cultures.